Hi, this is Carrie from BodyWisePerfectSize.com, bringing you an interview with Ragen Chastain. Ragen, how did you get to be a body image activist?
My journey to body positivity was kind of a long and winding and bumpy one, like most people I know, really. In school, I was always kind of bigger than everyone else, but I was also a successful athlete, and I just didn't get a lot of teasing from my body, and so I didn't think about it really that much. And then my junior year of high school, my friend's mom, who I'm sure she was, well-meaning, said to me, you're going to lose that weight, right? Like, you don't want to go to college fat, do you? And it was kind of like she flipped a switch in my brain. And with eating disorders, the best we know is that sort of genetics loads the gun and environment pulls the trigger. And that was my experience. I hadn't really thought about dieting or body size before that, but after that, it's really all I thought about. And I was, eating less and less and exercising more and more. And I went from dieting to disordered eating to developing an eating disorder. And I ended up in the hospital. And so I was being treated for this eating disorder, and I was also, as I was sort of refeeding and not compulsively exercising, I was gaining weight. And so I had, doctors and therapists trying to help me recover from my eating disorder, while my other doctors were telling me that I needed to lose weight to be healthy. And one doctor even said, well, don't go crazy like you did before, but like you're somebody who has a tendency to be heavy, so you're going to have to watch your weight your whole life, which is the last message really anyone needs, but especially someone dealing with an eating disorder. And this is something that happens all the time that I hear from people who are fat and have dealt with eating disorders. So for the next period of years, I followed my doctor's advice, and I did weight loss method after weight loss method after weight loss method. And I had basically the same experience everyone has. I would lose weight short term, and then I'd gain it back long term, typically a little bit more than I lost. And then they'd say, okay, well, that didn't work. We'll try something else. I decided, I was going to figure out like the best diet, the diet that worked the most. And that's sort of what brought me to health at every size, because when I went to school, I really focused on research methods and statistical analysis. And so I was like, I have the skills to evaluate these diets. Like, why did I never evaluate these diets? I started reading these studies on weight loss, and, I found, to my complete shock, that there wasn't a single study anywhere where more than a tiny, tiny fraction of people have been able to lose weight long term and keep it off. And that those people were losing like 5 or 10 pounds. And what most people did was they would lose weight short term and gain it back long term. Almost everyone had the same experience I did. And I was shocked, mostly because I think the idea that you can be thin if you try hard enough has been sold to me more aggressively than anything else in my life. Right, even more than the idea of beauty or the importance of youth. And those things are sold pretty widely and strongly. But this idea that, everyone who tries hard enough can be thin was sold to me by every healthcare practitioner I had ever talked to. And yet they had absolutely no reason to believe that was true. There was no research basis. And so that is when, I sort of started looking into health at every size. I mean, I believe really strongly that health is not an obligation. It's not a barometer of worthiness. It's not entirely within our control. And so people get to choose sort of how highly they prioritize health. But for me, it was something I wanted to pursue. And so I was like, well, all I had ever thought was the way to be healthy is to be thin. And so at this point, it had become painfully clear that that wasn't actually a realistic path, right? It would be like saying the only way to be healthy is to fly. Well, that is, I can jump off my garage and flap my arms real hard, but it's not going to happen, no matter how many doctors tell me it will. And so that is when I started doing the research and started to find research around the idea that, behaviors and environment are a better predictor of future health than is body size. When I say it now, we can't control our health, but our best chance of improving the odds are through, behaviors that support our health. It sounds like a big sack of obvious in a flaming obvious box. But at the time, I really had trouble wrapping my head around it, because I was like, health without weight loss for a fat person, like that, how is that possible? Because I'd never, ever been given the message that, well, you can pursue health outside of weight loss. In terms of how I got to fat acceptance and body positivity, that actually happened through my last failed weight loss attempt. I was in this program and I was eating an incredibly strict diet and I was gaining weight. And so I went in and I said, I quit. This is ridiculous. And they said, oh, you can't quit. And I said, no, I'm pretty sure I can quit. And so they made me go into a little room with a big poster about not quitting. It was literally the kitten that hangs from the rope and says, hang in there, baby. And so this woman comes in and she's got a binder and it's full of pictures of fat women, just kind of like stock photos. And she starts flipping through it and she goes, maybe you don't know it, but this is what you look like. And these women are going to die alone on the couch eating bonbons. And is that what you want for yourself? And aren't you tired of hating your body? And actually some really cool things happened. First of all, I was like, that's what I look like. I thought I looked so much like worse than those women. And so I was like, oh, like it was sort of that first tiny inkling of, well, if I don't hate the way they look, like why do I hate my own body so much? So I certainly wasn't there in terms of body positivity. It was the first inkling that like maybe I don't have to hate my body full time. And then I grew up in rural America on cattle ranches, had no idea what bonbons were. So that whole thing went right over my head. But I was like, God, I am tired of hating my body. Like I am exhausted from hating my body because I have been doing it like it was a job, full time. Like I was getting paid to hate my body and it never made me happier, never made me healthier. It never made me thinner. I was just miserable. And so I was like, well, you know what? Thank you so much. And she said, oh, no problem. Like get your meal plan on the way out. And I was like, no, I quit. Like you and the kitten, you can hang out, but you hang in there, baby, because I'm out. But so I got, out of there and I canceled my membership and I was sitting in my car and I made the decision, like, I am going to learn how to love my body as it is, right? So this is sort of before I did all the research and everything. I divided it into two parts. Part one, I was going to learn to love my body. And part two, I was going to lose weight so I could be healthy, right? But I was like, I've got to decouple these things because this is not working out. And it occurred to me that like hating your body 100% of the time probably is not a great platform to make choices for caring for it, right? So I had no idea how I was going to do it. And I was sitting in my car, and the thing that hit me at that moment was that I had spent so much time hating the way my body looked that I hadn't had a second's worth of gratitude for everything that it did for me. I had no gratitude. If a friend took care of me full time and all I did was complain about how they looked, they would stop taking care of me, right? They would lose the desire to help me. But my body had totally been there for me through like the ridiculousness I put it through. And so I went home and I made a list, a huge list, like 50, 60 pages of, college ruled notebook paper of everything I could think of my body did. Breathing, blinking, waist management, right? Hugging, smiling, waving, everything. And I decided to start really becoming conscious of the thoughts I had about my body. And I decided when I had a negative one, I was going to kind of interrupt it and I was going to replace it with gratitude with something from the list. And that's when stuff really started to shift for me, because I found the more gratitude I had for my body, the more I thought of my body as sort of a friend and partner. And the more I thought of my body as a friend, the less I was willing to accept the way that other people talked about my body and the way that I had talked about my body. Because I would never let anyone talk about one of my friends the way that I let people talk about my body and the way that I talked about my body, often out loud to other people. And so that really started to shift my relationship with my body, and that ended up shifting everything. And so at that point, I still believed that the path to health was losing weight, but I was like, no matter what happens with my size, I love and appreciate my body. And so sort of then the research came along and everything sort of came together after that. But that was the first part of the journey for me.
It must still be incredibly difficult, though, to live in such a fat-hating world.
It's a huge challenge, right? To be fat and to understand there's nothing wrong with being fat and that your body is amazing in a culture that gives you the opposite message all the time, right? And there's a lot of money in it, right? People make, the diet industry makes $60 billion a year by telling us that, we should do anything and everything to try to be thin. And so I think the first thing to do is to put the problem where it belongs, right? Because often diet companies try to convince us that we should become thin because we would then not be stigmatized for being fat, which is absolutely ridiculous. Like, well, honey, that bully who's beating you up every day, why don't you try giving him your lunch money? And then like, maybe he'll stop beating you up, right? Which isn't true, right? The bully will just find another reason to beat you up and have your lunch money. And so for me, I think it's really important to be clear that the problem isn't that I exist in a fat body. The problem is the way I'm treated for existing in a fat body. And then knowing that, each of us gets to make whatever choice we want. People who deal with depression get to choose how to deal with it. For me, fighting the oppression is the best choice because, not just because it may make changes to the world, although, activism really does make changes to the world. And I think that one of the most insidious messages is, you'll never make it better. Right. And so I think we can make it better. We do make it better. But it's worth trying because to me, like, what's the other option? I would rather fight back against the oppression, and then that reinforces to me that I'm not the problem and makes me feel happy that I'm doing something.
But there's so many bullies out there. How do you cope with that?
The amount of cyberbullying that I and other fat activists receive is staggering, really, that people have this kind of time. There used to be a Reddit community devoted specifically to hating fat people that had 150,000 members. Right, this is what they did, and they would go, on Reddit, and they would talk about us and make memes about us and pictures and stuff. And so, it wasn't something I expected, and I got like trickles of it. And then one day, a group of different websites got together, and they decided that they were going to target me for a fat hate day. And so I got about 5,000 either comments or emails, and the deal was they could say whatever they wanted to me, but they had to end with "kill yourself." Right. So I got like 5,000 comments in one day telling me to kill myself. And so that actually ended up being really helpful because it made it clear, like, this is not about me. Like, these are people who have problems. Right. And they've reached a place in their life that's really pretty pitiable and sad. And it's, it's not my fault. It's becoming my problem, and it sucks and it shouldn't happen. But like, it really helped me kind of put it in perspective. And then, as my blog has grown, so has the harassment that I received. And so they went from just, it used to be harassing me in Reddit groups, then it was creating my own Reddit group. Then some people actually took the time to create entire websites, which is sort of like, okay. They started to do things like try to get my talks canceled. So when I would get booked at, a college or corporation, and, and I'm saying this in past tense, but it still happens. Every time I get booked, they email and try to get the people to cancel me. Recently at an event, I had somebody come and like set up a little protest board, except it was like one of those like trifold science fair boards you do like in 6th grade. And I couldn't read it. And so I didn't know if they were protesting or just had done a poor, like a sort of crappy class project that they brought to my talk. So I was like, take a little more pride in your sign making. Like, mostly, I just wish my trolls would be a little better. Like, fatty's gonna fat it's old, it's done, it's beat. Like, think of something else to email me, And then at that same talk, the fire alarm got intentionally triggered at the very beginning of the second talk that I was giving. And so that ended up actually working out. And one of the things about trolls is that although it is really difficult and can be mentally exhausting, and it sucks to get hundreds of emails a day telling you that you're a horrible person, or telling you hope your partner dies, or bringing up your brother's suicide, like, and that's terrible. But there are also ways that they help. They drive traffic. In this case, people emailed me and they were like, oh, I didn't even know your talk was happening, but since everybody was standing outside with the fire, I decided to come to your talk because I wanted to see like what was so controversial, and like, wow, it was great, and thank you. So I try to find the sort of silver lining to the troll cloud. With the Ironman that I'm doing, I did tried a half Ironman last year, and they sort of upped it. People showed up. And so while I was standing at the swim corral, somebody came up to me and said, well, what did Reddit say about you this morning? Right. And then I found out later they had posted a minute-by-minute schedule of where I was going to be. People came and surreptitiously took pictures and videos of me so they could post it online. There were all kinds of like lies and myths that came out, which ended up being entertaining. The thing that is worrying is had, a couple of what seemed to be possibly credible death threats when I was giving talks, that kind of thing. So it goes from the ridiculous to the really scary.
Ragen, what suggestions do you have for people who aren't as strong as you but put up with regular fat hate?
I find it can really help to sort of have some mantras that you repeat in your head, because it's really hard, even once you sort of, quote unquote, get it and you realize like, oh, this entire thing is bullshit. You're still every day just being inundated with it. And so having little things that you say to remind yourself, like, this is not my fault, even if it's becoming my problem, I think is a really important one. Like, I go into a restaurant, they only have booths, I don't fit in any of the booths. Right? That's not my fault, even though it's become my problem. And the shame belongs to the people who know fat people exist and didn't have any way to accommodate them in the restaurant that they built. right? Those people should be ashamed of themselves. There's nothing wrong with me. And so things like that, or, every time you see something suggesting that weight loss works or that you should diet or that thin bodies are better, having a little mantra. My personal one is, hey, that's bullshit. But it's, your mileage may vary. So I have somebody wrote me and said that his mantra is nope, nope, nope. So whatever works for you. But yeah, just, kind of creating those strategies so that you can deal with what comes up. My friend Jeanette DePatty, who blogs at The Fat Chick, and I are creating this course called the Body Love Obstacle Course. And I think that envisioning it like that really helps me. Like I'm on this journey, and the world, because of its sizeism and misogyny and all the other, oppressions that exist, throws up these obstacles in my way. And so having strategies to kind of go over or around or through those obstacles can help you, even though you may not be able to change the situation, and even though stuff that is absolutely not your fault and should never happen ends up becoming our problem.
For the rest of my interview with Ragen Chastain, visit bodywiseperfectsize.com.